Hello and welcome to Azure's Live Mert to the Future. Today I have a very special guest, Elkhan Yusubov. I hope I can pronounce it correctly. And today we are going to talk about Azure Bicep. And Elkhan, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Mert. Thank you. I'm doing good. Thank you for invite. I'm really happy to
You're
be in your
welcome.
show. Mert is the future. That's really awesome name, by the way.
Thank you.
It's different from other ones. And yeah, I'm Elhan. I'm a longtime MCT. I have been in Microsoft community for a while, but trying to be more active on a Twitter. I never used Twitter that much, and I see Mert, you have a lot of Twitter, experience, and a number of followers there, good number. uh,
Thank
h-
you.
yeah, and about myself, I'm into currently I'm actually employed as a senior manager for the company called Terex Solutions. We are doing a lot of cloud work, especially the app modernization and migrations. And part of it is actually how we can make this journey, this client sync, how we can make this management of Azure resources easier. That's where Azure Bicep comes. And this Azure Bicep is an evolution of our ARM templates. And this session is going to help you to take your regular arm from Azure and turn that into Bicep, a powerful robotic arm that you can use in your daily challenges.
So before we start, I want to ask about your community contributions because you are very active in community and you have lots of followers on Cloud Marathoner, and also I know you from Cloud Launch and Learn. Can you please talk about your community stuff?
Sure. So for Cloud Launch and Learn, last year, last probably it was July or so, I became a core team member, meaning that I started to be part of those mentorship sessions and held these Cloud Launch and Learn sessions when I was helping other speakers to come up and speak about their passion. Other contributions is I'm running this Cloud Marathoner blog post, where the main idea is to help everybody who is trying to learn about cloud, the new beginners, to get to know, Azure resources, to know how you can get started with Azure, basically. In addition to that, I'm actually started to look into the GitHub, how these awesome type of repos are, emerging, and it was interesting. What's the deal behind? And I started this awesome Azure Bicep repo where we are sharing with the community, and there are like five more contributors there who are sharing their good resources where you can start learning not just beginning stuff about Azure Bicep and provisioning in Azure environment, but also a little bit more advanced things. And the part of it is that we are putting not just official thing that we see on Microsoft Docs, but we are also putting community contributions from MVPs, from the people who just blogging and learning about Azure Bicep, and find good tips and bits how to help in the process. In addition to that, I have been in a couple of shows. Like there's one of them is cloudskills.fm, which probably you heard about from Mike
Yeah.
Pfeiffer. So I've been a couple times there speaking about Azure Bicep as well. And as well as, just popping here and there, there's the Cloud family, right? Johnny
Yeah.
Chips, his show, and it's interesting fellow, and I like how his approach into streaming and bringing things alive. So I kind of made some shout outs, some announcements in his show as well, just then bring attention again back to the Azure Bicep, because this is a language, this is something that's evolving, but this is something that evolving in a way that will make your life easier. As if you're Azure DevOps person, or a Azure engineer who have to maintain the digital infrastructure in Azure, this is the way to go. This is the where Microsoft put a lot of investment behind, just to make sure that you have a nice, pleasant, clean experience to manage Azure resources.
Okay, great. I don't have any bicep experience, so I can ask different questions to you. So
I would say then you are like right in the spot. This is the show to be, guys. So don't miss out this one. Yeah.
okay, thank you. So let's start then.
Yes, sure. So I'm sharing my screen, and hopefully everybody is seeing that. And by the way, as Mert mentioned, if you have any questions during the show or demo that I'm going to do, put the question there, we'll bring it and make sure that it will get answered. Okay, that's the whole purpose here. All right, so going forward, this a little bit info about myself and where I was contributing and what I was doing. But at the end of the day, I just want to mention again that Marathon or blog post that I'm running is actually created for the community to be used and learn all the things that going on in the cloud, especially for the beginners. Okay, that's enough about myself. If you want to get connected, I have a LinkedIn and Twitter handle there on the right side. So please, you know what to do. All right. This is a little bit information about the company where I employed, and we have a number of open positions. So if you are kind of interested to switch the jobs or you are in the market, you are more than welcome to apply. We have a number of partnerships with cloud solution providers. And the main thing that we are doing with within the TRX solution, it's basically we are serving the government and federal civilian agencies within the United States. And U.S. Census Bureau is one of the biggest mission critical achievements and accomplishments we did. And it's an ongoing operation that where we helped our customers as well. Again, please feel free to reach out back to me if you have any questions. And I will be, very welcoming you to join our team. All right. So now the main part, what we are going to cover in this today in our show. So first, of course, we'll start with basics. We'll start what is Azure Bicep, right? So first, we need to know where to use it and what's the purpose of that tool. Second, we'll look into why Bicep Language, meaning that what is the benefit of using it, right? Why you should spend your time, energy learning something new if it is new, but you will feel very familiar by the end of the show. You would feel that you are already know how to deal with that, hopefully. Second, we'll look into evolution and how to get started with Azure Bicep because this is a dynamic language. It is not preset. It is still evolving and you would know it from the versions that you would seek. Next, we'll look into some best practices, right? Because when we start doing something, of course, first we'll learn the basics and then we would want to go ahead and look into the what are the recommended practices to follow. And of course we'll have a bunch of demos to make sure that you get your feet wet with Azure Bicep, right? Okay, so let's start then. First, what is Azure Bicep, right? So Azure Bicep, whenever you talk about that, think about infrastructure as a code, meaning that whatever resources, whatever things that you are running in your cloud, if you can codify them and make sure that you can basically put them in a source control and have a good grasp about what changes are there, what are the resources are running. This is where this tool is coming. A similar thing for Azure Bicep is Terraform. You may heard about. So it's also doing good stuff with infrastructure as a code. But there are of course differences. Okay, and but starting with again coming back to the Azure Bicep, it's a domain specific language. Oh, Mert, do you hear some noises? If you want, you can mute. If you want.
No.
No. Yeah, there are some background noises. I don't know why, but let's continue. All right. So here, basically, with Azure Bicep, right? So first of all, it's a domain specific language, meaning that what does it mean? It means that you can use Azure Bicep only for Azure. Okay, that's the purpose why it's created. You cannot take it and say, okay, I can use Bicep language for AWS or any other cloud. No, it's just not gonna work because that's not the purpose of it. Purpose of the Azure Bicep is to simplify the resource creation and management experience with a cleaner syntax and more code reuse. That's where it shines. And this new language actually aims to make it easier to write infrastructure as a code for developers, for cloud engineers, and DevOps engineers that typically create those ARM templates targeting the Azure Resource Manager API. So what is Azure Resource Management API? What is the ARM? What is the Bicep? We want to get some picture there, right? So it's kind of clear for everyone. Let's look at that diagram. Here's a diagram. Actually, it's very useful. As I say, pictures, are better than 1,000 words. So here, the Azure ARM Manager layer that I was talking about, this is this blue line, which means that this is the layer where all the requests come to the Azure before they get provisioned, before your resources get changed or created or updated. So as you see before this layer, we have ARM templates here. ARM templates is basically it's a JSON constructed description of your Azure resources. That's what it is. But on top of ARM templates, you have Bicep language, meaning it's an abstraction on top of it. And the reason why Bicep language was created is understanding and dealing with ARM templates is very complex. It's not intuitive. And if you try to, use your coding skills, your programming skills with ARM templates, it's just not gonna work because it's a JSON created description, which means it's for machines to communicate with each other, right? And the easiest way, like 10, 15 years ago, to do that was to make sure that it's a JSON and it's even though it's long and cumbersome, but that was the way to do that. Now, in last 2 years, Microsoft team understood that hey, if you want to make this process easy, if you want to help beginners to have this easy way to understand and start learning, then we need to do some change, and that evolution was a kickstart for Bicep language to evolve, to come forward. All right, that's it. Okay, we are next. After the next slide, after this slide, actually, I'm going to show some demos, just to get warm up with that. And why Bicep language? That's very important because if you know the answer to the why, then we will have a motivation to learn, and or we would know that hey, this is not for me because this is not what I'm trying to achieve. Right? They're like two-way story here. So why Bicep language? First, it's easy to understand and maintain Bicep language because it's like you're writing a very simple code, okay? And that code is going to define your resources. And we'll look into that using the Visual Studio Code, all right? Next, it has a day zero support. And what does it mean? It means that in Azure, it's cloud, right? In a cloud, there are changes, every month, every week, maybe even every hour. There are certain resources that get new updates, okay, or certain things are getting obsolete, because there are new features or new properties that you should be using. So in order to get that support with day zero support, by using the Bicep language, you can get to invoke those APIs, those new features right away using the Bicep language. Because Bicep language is using the latest API spec that Azure ARM provides. That's the beauty of it. If you are using Terraform or you are using Pulumi or any other kind of third-party provider, you don't have such flexibility. You have to wait for the updates from Terraform, Pulumi, or any other third-party provider kind of tool so that you can use those new features and being able to do that. So that's why with Bicep language, it comes with day zero support. That's the reason behind. Next, why is transparent abstraction, meaning that this is something that's abstraction over ARM templates, and whatever you do on Bicep language, okay, and let's say that Bicep language code actually get compiled into ARM templates so that it can be applied on your ARM layer of the Azure, because that's how it's working. So whatever you have in Bicep language, it needs to be good enough to get compiled into ARM templates. And if it is not compliant, let's say there are some issues or something, we have a good extension in Visual Studio Code which will alert you. It will tell you, hey, something wrong. This code is not going to work. Okay, so that's kind of transparent abstraction. Awesome tooling in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to show that on Visual Studio Code, which extension you need to install and use. Next, we have clean code and syntax. You would see that right away once I show the first example. Because it would be very intuitive for you. If you wrote, very simple code in your life, you would find it very easy to understand. Next, code reusability and modularity. So the way how the modules and why it is important, right? So you can start with few resources when you are deploying and managing your Azure infrastructure, but over time, you would see that you would have to, create new environments. You would have to basically, reuse certain components in your Azure resources because, they are related to each other, and you don't want to just copy paste things right around, because that's kind of recipe for disaster, as most of you know. So in order to have that in place, there's this modularity in Azure Bicep that will make sure that you write code just once in a Bicep file, but you can reuse that as a module on other Azure Bicep files. So if there's a bug, if there's a fix that you have to do, you would do that only in one place. You don't need to go around and try to find where you did the same mistake like a couple months ago. All right. Next is deep integration with Azure. This is coming from the principle that Azure Bicep actually using the latest API spec of Azure ARM layer. That's the reason why it comes with deep integration. And in other words, whatever you can do in ARM templates, or you have capabilities to do that, the same things you can do in Azure Bicep, because they are, there's like this deep integration, and you can, basically it's a ready tool just to go and use all your knowledge that you have about ARM templates. Next, pre-flight validation, what it is. When you construct some resources, right, there are possibility that something might be wrong in your resource, meaning that you might be missing certain resources, or some relationships might be created wrong. And it would be very bad if you just try to deploy your dozens of resources. Let's say you have 50 resources in your deployment script, and you deploy them, and in the middle of the deployment you find out that, hey, something went wrong, so it's going to fail, right? It's going to be horrible. So in order to prevent that, there is this concept of pre-flight validation, which you also have in PowerShell scripts, if you familiar with that. So that same concept came to the Azure Bicep language, so that when you run those commands, you can say that, hey, let me check it first. If everything is good, then let's deploy. That's actually a very useful thing, and you can compare that to the pain that you may have with your Terraform files, where you have to maintain the state file, right? If your state file get corrupted, you are basically open to a lot of issues there. Okay, so no state management, and this is the case that because again, state management is required when you are using, for example, Terraform tool for your deployments. But with Azure Bicep, it is not required, because all the resources that you have in the script and you are trying to deploy, you can use this pre-flight check, meaning that the state of your resource is going to be compared with the state of the resources that already deployed. And if there are any variation, let's say there's like 5 new resources which are going to be created, and 4 of them are going to be updated, you would see that in your response back from the pre-flight validation command, and you would know what to do. Okay, if you don't intend to update certain resources, then you can adjust your script accordingly. All right, this is about state management. And finally, product support, right? So with Bicep language, when it just initially came aboard, which was like, August of 2020, at that time there was no official support, meaning that you were on your own if you want to try it or not. But after the March 2021, when official version 0.3 has been released, then it is officially supported product under Microsoft contracts, meaning that if you have agreement with Microsoft, as as a organization who is doing production work, then if you get into issues with your Azure Bicep code or execution, then you can actually open the official support ticket with Microsoft and follow up on that. They are trained and they are ready to support you in that, if you have any problems with that. Okay. Okay, so production support is there. Okay, so any questions about this? Why? If there's any questions in the studio, please put that in the chat. Okay, that's it. Let's come to the versions here. What versions and how it get evolved. So as you may see, if you go and type this command, let me make it a little bit bigger. Just a second. I forgot my zoom it tool. Okay, here it is. So basically, if you go ahead and type easy bicep um, list versions, you would get this list of the versions. And as you see, there's there's a big number. It started with the alpha, and now the latest four, it's a zero point 0.4 something at the end. But they all come with some new features, and some of those features I'm going to demo today. uh, but looking into the history, it started with the alpha version in August 28th, 2020. That's when it first kind of came aboard. Then official support version where you can open Microsoft ticket and troubleshoot that. Start with the version 0.3.1. Then of course you have this latest version, and expected version for the zero point 0.5 is the March. And right after, according to Microsoft Azure Bicep team, they have community calls. According to information that I have there, in the March they are planning to do the zero point 0.5 version release, and right after zero point 0.5 they are intending to have the version 1.0. And this is going to happen this year. It's going to be the first stable version, which means that it will be some type of milestone. And you may ask, why there's so many versions. Well, the overall idea here is to get the feedback from community and implement certain features in a way that useful for your day-to-day job, and for performing your Azure environment management. All the commands and all the features that you need to have, they are trying to put most of them into the version 1.0. Okay, that's the idea behind. But even with the version that we have now, it's still very compelling. Uh,
And is it included in Azure CLI or do I need to install an extension?
That's a great question. So with Azure CLI, if you go and install Azure CLI version 2.22 or above, then Azure Bicep is going to be part of it, but you would have to enable it, meaning that it's a component of Azure CLI. Okay, starting from that given version, you would have to enable the Bicep. And if you type AZ Bicep and it's not enabled, you would get a prompt what command you need to run in order to enable it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah. And yeah. So and that said, now we come to the Azure Bicep, right? So also Azure Bicep. So what it is, I will show you. But before telling about this, I want to come back to the Mert's question that again for Azure CLI, you need to make sure your version is 2.20 or later. If you are using PowerShell, you can still use the Bicep, but you would need to make sure that your version is 5.6 or later one, or you are using PowerShell core. Then it's going to work there. So regarding this Azure, awesome Azure Bicep, this is basically, before jumping into that, I want to mention that you can run your Azure Bicep on any platform, because Azure CLI itself and PowerShell core, you can run them on Mac, on Windows, on Linux, any environment. They are cross-platform. So that makes it basically ideal tool for you as well, no matter what platform you are using. So now about Azure, awesome Azure Bicep, right? What it is. So this is basically a community effort to make sure that everybody who is trying to learn about Azure Bicep has good resources to start from. Okay, and let me bring the screen now. So let me make it a little bit bigger. So this is the basically no repo that's if you again, if you type awesome Azure Bicep, it will come right away in your GitHub. And here we have contributors who already contribute into this thing. And what you can find here is basically it's divided into two pieces. One is the official, meaning that this is all the Microsoft documentations about Azure Bicep and how to get started from MS Learn and all these goody things. Second one is the community contributions, which are the videos, blog posts, articles, reposts that community members like you, like Mert, and other people are contributing into the GitHub. All right, and if you have any, and the most important thing is that I would like you to basically start it, like it, and then fork it. And the reason why you want to fork it, if you learn about Azure Bicep and you find a resource that's not here yet, just make your PR, you make your pull request, and I would be more than glad to add you into this, glad your resource into this repo. All right. Okay, this is the Azure Bicep. Another thing, like if you don't want to read but you want to learn from video course and you want to get started that way, learning Azure Bicep, Another one is this Azure Bicep First Look, which is the LinkedIn video course that I have created last year. So you can also jump there and try to watch it. It has this content here. As you see, it has like introduction to Azure Bicep. Then it goes into the details of, about how to structure them, what are the good practices, and plus how you can decompile your existing ARM templates into the Azure Bicep and make them basically modernize your infrastructure as a code environment. All right, that's it. I'm going to come back here. This was the information about how to start with Azure Bicep and how awesome Azure Bicep resources can help you in this journey. All right. And this is about the Azure Bicep First Look video course that I just mentioned. Now, before jumping here, it would be nice just to bring the Visual Studio Code and crank some code, right? Let's do that. I'm going to bring the Visual Studio Code. I hope everyone can see my screen. Okay. And what we
And
have,
I'll make it full screen for better viewing.
so is it full screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. So basically, what we are going to do now is I'm going to use, before actually doing anything here, let me mention that this repo itself is also in GitHub. And this, you can find this by going into all the code and samples. You can find by going into this Learn Bicep GitHub. Okay. uh, uh, Again, it's under the GitHub repos, and the purpose here is basically, you want to learn by doing things, right? You want to practice them, and part of it is I have these Cloud Marathon blog posts that are going to help you to implement some of the best practices in your Azure Bicep code. And for example, some of them are security related, like hardening parameter inputs on Azure Bicep file. You can just right click, look at this article and then do all these exercises based on the files that we have on that GitHub repo. Okay. It all will show you tips and tricks and what you need to have in place. Okay. That said, I'm going to switch back now to the Azure Learn Bicep repo because I'm going to use this repo, the samples that you can find here. It's going to take a little bit of, yeah, all these samples, there's like 14 of them that you can use and practice in order to learn about Azure Bicep. So let me go back to the Visual Studio Code now. So what we are going to do here is that under this, under the samples, okay, I'm going to create a new file. And this new file, I'm going to put the name empty.bicep.
And do I need to install an extension for Bicep?
Ah, yes, that's a great. Thank you for reminding. So basically, as you see here, we have this robotic arm, right? So this means that I have an extension installed. So in order to install the extension that can give you a great deal of, support, you need just to go to the extensions and type the bicep. Okay, so once you type the Bicep here, you would get this Microsoft extension from Microsoft Bicep team that's you need to install. Okay, so once you click on it, you can of course go ahead and look into the details and different features and what you can use. It has a lot of like autocomplete, IntelliSense, and plus a lot of tips that will help your experience of developing Azure Bicep code much easier, smoother, and more or less, compliant with the best practices. Okay. All right. Thank you for reminding that. It almost, slept over. So I'm
Yeah.
going to go back to the samples file, if you remember, and I created this empty.bicep, right? I just, said new file here on top, new file by clicking this icon, and then I typed empty.bicep. And the reason why I put the .bicep extension at the end is that then your bicep extension will get activated and you will get good tips. So before doing anything here, right? So I don't have anything here. It's empty file. I will show you how empty bicep file actually get converted into the ARM templates. And to do that, of course, first I would say in your terminal, let's open terminal again here. You can always open the terminal by, going and clicking on new one. And you can run your terminal, in any way. Like you can have a git bash as a partial, whatever you prefer to. In my case, it's defaulted to the PS. So here what we are going to do is First, we are going to build this empty.bicep file into an ARM template, empty.json file, which is the representation of ARM template. And the reason is simple. If you go here and say az bicep build, but before actually running this command, let me introduce you what commands are actually in Azure Bicep exist. Okay, if you go and say az bicep and then help or dash dash help. Okay, so let me make it bigger. There's very few commands actually available here. There's a command to build, which means that if you take any bicep file and run the build command, it's going to generate the ARM template representation of that bicep file. Okay, then you have a decompile. This is the one that you can use in order to get your existing ARM template from your Azure environment, and then get the best automated kind of decompilation into Bicep. It's not going to be perfect. There is a probability that you would have to go and refactor that because it's auto-generated, but it is a one way to start with that modernization of your existing ARM templates. Next one is if you don't have this Bicep again install, if you remember that, you have AZCLI installed, but Bicep is not installed, you can run this command. And then you can list the versions. You can basically, publish your Azure Bicep file into a private registry. Okay, that that is the one of the features that's going on developed at the moment as well. Then you have uninstall upgrade is the one if you have an older version of your bicep file and you want to upgrade that one, you can just type that command az bicep upgrade and it will be nicely done for you on CLI environment. And version, you can check your version by just typing az bicep version. All right, so this is the only commands that you would need to know, which is great. You don't have to deal with much. All right, so coming back to our, so first we are going to type, create, we'll convert our empty bicep file into ARM template, okay? Just to make sure that you know how they are related, the bicep and ARM template. So to do that, I'm just going to type az bicep build, okay, and then we need to define the file. Now where is the empty bicep file? In our case it's under the samples folder and start with empty. So what I did, I just typed the first few letters and then press on tab. It will nicely autocomplete your command, and then let's press on enter. Okay, let's see. So here we go. It says that there was some linter configuration which I'm going to talk about, and it actually created this now we should find empty.json file somewhere here. And here it is. If you go and look near your empty.bicep, you have this empty.json created. If you click on it, let me actually make it bigger and take this out. Okay. Now we have empty biceps that get translated into empty JSON, which is the basically it took this metadata from our bicep language, okay, and using this metadata and version of bicep, it created this empty ARM template where, as you know, it's a JSON schema, so you should have this JSON schema reference in the schema, and plus because we don't have anything, our resources are empty. Now let's look at another example where we have some resources. Okay, so let me close these files and go back. And in order to run that command, I would say, in this learn bicep GitHub, let's go into the modules. Okay, under the modules here, you will see that I have this simple storage. Let's find that. Here it is. Actually, it's called storage.bicep. And what we have here is this time we have parameters. Let me make it bigger here. Okay, so we have here parameters. We have storage name, location, we have environment name. Then we have this certain, variable that gets your environment name. And if it is a prod, it's using geo-redundant storage, okay, which type of a storage that you can create in Azure. Or if it is not a prod, it's going to use standard local redundant storage. Then we have this variable that actually generates your account name, which is your storage account name based on the storage name and environment. Based on those variables, it's going to generate your account name. And once this generated, this is your storage account. Then we have actually, let me show you some tips of how you can proceed here. As you see here, we have these yellow squiggly lines, right? And the reason why we are getting that is basically saying that, hey, it would be nice if you don't have this location group that which is resource groups location name. So here I'm saying that in order to deploy this storage account, use the resource groups location, which if it's a EastUS, then it's going to use EastUS. But at the moment of when I'm writing a code, I may not know it. So here suggestion says that, hey, why you don't move it to the parameter? Why you don't make it a actual parameter? And there is this nice, bulb. I'm going to click on it and say, okay, if you want, you can disable this. So if you want, keep it as is, which is not the error, okay, warning, it's just not a good practice. So it can tell you do that one, but we would say, okay, let's apply the best practice and take this out. To do that, we would need to create a new parameter, and let's do that one. Okay, param. And this is going to be a string parameter of location, right? This is deployment location. So we'll say deployment location. All right. And then for deployment location, that's actually not a good idea. You know why, guys? Because we already have a location here, right? So this location, and if you want to use the same location, it's already referencing. So let's actually take this location of deployment and actually put it here. That would be better approach, because then we'll make sure that, wherever our resource group is deployed, both storage accounts are going to be there. This is one of the good practices, best practices to follow. So we saved it. So now what we have three parameters. We have variable, we have one storage account resource, and we have another storage account resource. But the whole idea why we came here is we want to actually look into the ARM template representation of that, right? So we have this file, we know it's under the module. So let's convert let's convert the storage.bicep into ARM template and look into that. So if you want to do that, we are going to run the same command. We'll say build, uh, actually AZ bicep build, right? That's what was it. Then we need to put the -f, which stands for the file, okay, location of our file. It's under the modules, if you remember. And this is the storage.bicep. That's the name, storage.bicep. Okay, let's press on enter. And it's created. So if we go ahead now and look into our file structure, under the modules where we had the storage bicep, now we see here that we have a storage.json, which is ARM template representation of that. And if we click on it and take this out, you would see that it's created here. And let me actually make sure we can compare those things. So let's take this out and this one also out. So what you see on the left side here, we have representation in the Bicep language, right? So where we define the parameter, we define the storage account resource group here, and then we define that another storage account here. On the right side here, we have this ARM template representation of that, which is much longer. You see, it's like 50 something more lines here. And when we look at that, we have this metadata that shows us, from where this ARM template was generated, what was the version of Bicep that was used, as it is, indicated here. Next, we see the parameters. So we have the indication for storage name, we have parameter for location, environment, and we have variables, right? They're all defined here, both variables. Then we have resources, because we have two simple storage account resources. So we should have two resources here. This is the array, as you see. So there's a collection of resources under. So first one is defined here, and second one is defined here. So this is, how they are related to each other. It's almost like, I wouldn't say it's a one-to-one mapping, but it is in a way that whatever you can create in Azure Bicep, it's going to be it should be compilable to ARM template so that you can actually, deploy that into Azure environment and see those resources. So this was kind of small demo about, how you take your Bicep file and look into ARM template representation. Okay. So let me go back now to the slides and continue where we left. So next thing is actually your Bicep config file. Bicep config file is one of the best practices if you are writing your Bicep code as a team, right? So you want to make sure you have certain standards and everybody follows them. And this is a nice addition to best practices within the Bicep. So let's look what you need, why you need that one, and how you can get started with Bicep config files. Okay. So in a nutshell, what it is, it's basically it's a file that you add. Let's look at that, how to add one, and let's look how to add one and what's the default configurations. In order to look into them, I'm going to bring the back this our learn bicep GitHub repo. And here, if you scroll down here, you will see that we have bicep config. All right, this is the file that we are talking about. And the name is actually, it should be bicep config, otherwise it's not going to be interpreted as the one. So once we have bicep config here file, then you would see that it's basically a JSON representation of the rules. We have a number of rules here, right? And these are the rules why we're getting this yellow warning in our compilation when we're trying to, make any build on our Azure Bicep file. And you would see that we have here no hard-coded environment URLs, we have no unused parameters, and we have a warning here. But in fact, you can change them. Let's say if your team says there should be no file with hard-coded environment URL, you can actually go and assign it as an error, as you see here. So you have these options, right? So you have options to do it as a warning, meaning that you will see that yellow squiggly lines. You can also make it error, which will turn into red lines. But the difference is between all these three statuses and error is that once you put it as an error and one of your teammates actually put a hard-coded environment URL into Bicep config, and if it tries to build it or deploy it, then it's going to fail right away. Okay, it's going to tell you that, hey, you are violating this rule. It's an error, so go and fix it. Okay, and there are like many more of these rules here. So in our case, for this level, let's put it back to warning. But if you want to add some more, there are like more than close to 20 something rules. For example, here, if I want to add another rule, there's like explicit rule saying that no hard-coded locations, meaning that if you go and put a hard-coded like location for Azure region where you want to deploy your file, like a West US or East Europe or Western Europe, whichever is close to you, you would get actually this rule is going to be kicked off and it will check your bicep config file against any hard-coded locations. All right. So so that's kind of like other rules that are existing here. For my case here, I'm just sufficient with these 8 or 7 rules that we have here. Okay. So how they are actually affecting you. So let's say we have these rules here. So let's see how they are going to affect our files. Let's look into the demo where we have some parent-child relationship between Azure Resources and learn about it a little bit. So I'm going to switch here to the sample files here, and I'm going to go to the file number 14, deployment child, this one. And let's take this out and this one also. So we are on this 14 deployment file, and let's look what we have here before jumping into it. It might be actually confusing when you look at that. You read the code, there's a lot of not there's a number of things here. There's a much easier way to analyze this visually that Bicep team actually helps with that. And this is about using this file visualizer, this one over here. So I'm going to click on this icon on the right top corner. This will appear once you install your Bicep extension. So once I click on that, what we'll get here is actually a good visualization of what these resources are trying to compose, what they are trying to bring once you deploy them into the Azure Bicep environment, no, into the Azure environment of your choice. So this says that we will have one storage account and we'll have a number of containers. That's what it says. And some of these containers are going to be using this blob service. Okay, so let's see, what are they? So I'm going to close that. So as you see here on top, when we start, we have array of the container names, right? Then what we have, again, we have this, one of the best practices is not implemented here, but now you know what to do. We can replace this with a, you know, with a parameter. That's one way to do that. Another way, so there's like options. There are like at least three options how you can deal with parent-child relationship within the Azure resources. First one is here that first option is you get your child resource created with reference to the parent, meaning that our parent storage account, sorry, our parent storage account is actually called storage account. It's here, okay? And this storage account need to have a blob service created. For this given blob service, we are going to create our container in blob service. So this representation is here under the option one. Second option that we have is if you don't want to create your child resources as a separate entity, but you want them to be part of your main parent deployment, if that's the condition that you want to have, you can use option number two where you define your blob service, okay, and then of course the parent of your blob service needs to be your storage account, and then you define your container, okay, saying that hey, the container that will be part of this blob service is going to be named as internal container for the blob storage. And the last one, option three that we have here, and we are going to deploy this file into our Azure environment to see how they are dealing there. And last one is how we can automate things. Let's say you have like 50, 100 of container names that you have to deploy into given storage account because that's the pre-setup for the application that you are running in production. So you can do that using this, enumeration over these container names that are, and let's say we forget what are those container names. You can right click and say go to the definition, and it will bring you right there where those container names are defined. So this is a simple example where you have only three container names, but imagine that there are like hundreds of them. Okay, then it will make a big difference. So if you scroll down, so this, what happens here is that for each container name that we have in this array, in this collection, it's going to iterate and it will create a new container using given storage account, and it will put the name that we define in our array. Okay, so let's actually do something here, right? So let's create this storage account and let's deploy these containers there. And these containers are actually blob containers. Okay, so they are not like containers in a AKS or something like that. So don't confuse them. Okay, we are not talking about that. So to do that, I'm going to do the following first. Okay, first we would need to go ahead and create actually the resource group. All right, and I have this. If you want to do something and you forget certain things, I have the scripts actually here, so you can actually go ahead and check them out. So first, again, let's create the resource group. Okay, so to create the resource group in our environment, first we need to make sure that we are connected to Azure. All right, to check that, you can use this first script here that will go ahead and try to, you know, easy account show query name. It will tell you, what subscription you are connected to. Okay, and if it's a wrong one, you can change it. Next, you can run this query to look into your existing resource groups in your subscription. We are running this command, and it will give us this tabular nice way of looking into the, and we see that we have we don't have anything parent child here, all these container names, which is good. So next what we are going to do is actually we are going to create the resource group to deploy our Azure to deploy our storage account and containers that we saw on the example. Okay, to do that I'm going to type az group, okay, create, and then we are going to give the name to our resource group. In our case I'm going to give the name that's kind of very clear. It's a parent child container for our deployment of the storage account, and then as a location I'm going to select the east US. All right, let's click on enter. So what will happen is we should get this okay, I made a spelling error here. That's a good. So create, we need to, all right, create. So like there was a, all right, so it looks like it's created. So once this created, it was pretty fast. Next thing is we are going to deploy our file. So what's our file? We are going to deploy this 14 dash deploy child parent. Okay, we should deploy a one storage account and should deploy a number of containers there. So let's do that. In order to deploy that, we are going to type, okay, let me make sure I don't, okay, where this file went. It's here. Okay, it's too big actually. That's why the certain things are. Let me look at this. All right. So basically, I'm going to type here the deployment script. So we are going to deploy our resource group, and we are going to create deploy that file, right? 14 using the same resource group, which is the RG, stands for resource group parent. Then we have child, and then we need to define the file where our script is. In our case, it is under the samples folder, if you remember, and this should start with 14-deploy. Press on tab and it's auto completed. So, but before deploying this, we want to make sure we run the pre-flight check validation. If you remember, that's a good practice to make sure that you know what's going to happen in your Azure environment, in your subscription. So I put there -C at the end and press on enter. So while this thing is going to get its first validation, I want to bring here the resource groups. And if we refresh this, you would see that there was 10, but now it's 11 resource groups. And the one that just get created using our scripts is actually this one, resource group parent child. So I'm going to click on that. And here, as you see, it's empty. There's nothing here, right? So there's nothing here because our deployment didn't finish yet. I'm going to go back, and here it says, hey, you have this change. So let's look at them. So it says that we have a number of changes which are in green. It says we are going to get a new storage account named by this, name, and a number of one blob service and containers are going to be deployed here. So let's do that. Let's press on Y, which means that we want to continue with this deployment. And now actual deployment will try to succeed. Let's see what will happen. So while it's running the code, I'm going to bring back again this, and so far there is nothing. And this is the deployment script. If you go to the resource group and click on and come back to the settings and deployment, you can see the progress, what's going on within your deployment. In this case, and it's failed. So let's look why it failed. I'm going to go back to it says that, hey, it failed actually, because there was a, let's see what happened. Resource name contains invalid characters. Okay, so we have this error. So in order to fix this, I need to go to my file. Let me see where it is. No, not this one. I'll go back to my file 14, and here actually I find the issue is here. It's container name. Within the container name, it should be between 3 to 63 characters long, and you can have hyphens but no capital letters. I have a capital C here, as you see, guys. Right? It's a capital C in the name of container. So I'm going to make it smaller, you know, small letter, lowercase, and save the same file. So I saved it. Now I'm going to try to redeploy it again. So this time I'm saying, okay, redeploy this, and let's see what happens. Again, issue why on a first trial our resource group didn't get deployed was that the name that we had here, so it succeeded now. If you go to the overview, refresh it, we see that here's the storage account that we were expecting to be deployed. And if you click on it and then go to the containers, you see these are the container names that we saw. There was a data log, there was input, logs, output, and this was the basically, container name that had this capital letter C that actually failed our deployment. But we fixed it because we looked at the error log. Okay, that's cool. So next, actually, I'm looking at the time. I want to show you some automation, because we don't want to go ahead and always, go in the mode of deploying something from the terminal. We want to make sure we can use GitHub workflow or some automation. It can be Azure pipeline as well. So to do that, this is the Azure visualizer. I'm going to fast forward to this automating with GitHub workflow. All right. In order to look into the sample, how you can do that, those workflows are here in Learn Bicep GitHub repo, and they are here under the GitHub main deployment. Okay, and if you look, this is a YAML representation of deployment, which you might be familiar if you used any GitHub workflow actions. What you need to know is that in order to make this build happen, you need to use GitHub workflow actions like ARM deploy, and plus you need to put uh, your Azure secrets like tenant name and as well as your subscription ID into the GitHub secrets. Okay, that's because that's the one of the good practices that you should follow. And here you can look and get all the steps. So, but I'm not going to go through each of them because you can look at them on your own. What I'm going to do is in the deployment file, I'm going to make a small change here that will deploy this file. Okay. Once we check in the file into the GitHub repo to the Learn Bicep, it's going to just deploy it by itself. So to do that, what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to make here test pipeline 2. I just, made some change in the repo. But what this should deploy, we can look into the Azure Bicep Visualizer. It will help us quickly look into that. So once we click on that, we should see one storage account to be deployed. We should see an app service, application insight service, and application service plan, right? That's what it should deploy. And if you look into this file, you would see some good practices where parameter is defined by, number of the limited allowed values or max or minimum lengths for the given resources. So you can look at them and look into the how you can configure your environment and all the goodies that come with that. So what I'm going to do again, I'm going to check in this file through terminal. And once we check in this file, you should see the build going on. So let's do that. Git status, let's look at the status. We have a lot of files here, but I want to just check in this deploy file. Okay, let's do that one. So we can say, git add deploy main bicep. Okay, so let's check the Git. So one file is added. So let's see if we can deploy just that one. Git commit test deployment. Okay, now let's look at our Git status. So it says that, we have one file changed for insertion, so we can commit one, right? That's what we see here. So I'm going to say git push. And while this push is going, to make sure it's not a cooked demo, I'm going to go to resource groups and bicep test RG because that's the resource group. And as you see, guys, we have no resources here, right? It's empty, nothing here. So now I'm going to switch to the learn bicep GitHub repo where we put these changes. Let me make it a little bit, and I'll go into the pull request. No, learn bicep. I'll go into actions actually and refresh this. All right, let's look at what's going on. So do we have the deployment here? Okay, so when we look at our file, we see that we actually had 1 minute ago, we had this deployment. So we need to merge from deployment to our main. So let's do that one. Let's go to our learn bicep. Okay, we are in deployment and let's actually make this PR request. Test deployment, good enough. Create pull request. Yeah, I thought I'm using actually a main repo, but it looks like I used the other one. Okay, create pull request. We'll make it smaller here. Able to merge. Main. Pull request failed. Validation. You can't perform that action at this time. So something is actually wrong on the I don't know what's this error but anyway, so once you do this deployment, what we should see if things go, as planned, you should see actually your deployment going on, your scans are actually going to happen, and you should see that file to be created. And while your pull request is actually going to be created, you can go and look into each process, how you set up the job and everything. And if there's any error, it should come up here. So in our case, it looks like we got into issue here because we deployed into the development environment, and with the pull request, we have some, GitHub doesn't cooperate with that. Let's do it once more, just try to do this. Test deployment. No, there is something wrong. You can't perform this action at this time. So I'm not sure, did I run, into some request or something, but I will have to look into that. So I can't merge at this time. I don't know why. I need to look into view the code of contact and probably look at what's wrong with that. But ideally, it should basically, run this action here. But we can do the following, if you are still here and have a couple minutes, I'm going to do the following instead. I'm going to switch the branches here. Git checkout main. And let's look at Git status. So we still have a lot of things here on branch main. Okay. Git push. So let's see if we can push to the main branch. Check that fetch first, failed to push. Okay, we need to fetch and get the latest Git status. right? So we are on a main and there is nothing. So we have three origin main by three commits and can be fast forwarded. Okay, git pull. Okay, we get the latest now. Let's look. We are working on a small screen here because git status. Okay, I need to discard everything actually before doing anything. So I will actually put them there. Okay, I will fix it by the end of the day today, so you can check up the repo and get it working. But coming back to our slide where we were, okay, I just want to mention that check up these actions, workflow actions. They are very important to have in place to save you time. Next, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We can address them. Okay. Is there any questions, Matt, by the way?
And I have a question.
All right.
I know the default answer is MS Docs or MS Learn, but I wonder where should I start learning Bicep?
Okay, where you can start learning Bicep. That's awesome question. So to start learning Bicep, I would say that go ahead and check this awesome Azure Bicep. This is the resource basically, where you can get all the details about official and community resources. Okay. And once you're done with that, you can also check the Learn Bicep, the Git repo that we use today for demos. Okay. And follow the articles in order to be able to learn and practice things on your own. And if you have any questions here, ping me back. I'll be, happy to help you in that process. And finally, if you have a LinkedIn learning account, I would suggest to go and start, watching this Azure Bicep First Look video course. It will also help you in your journey, and it has like real life scenarios where you can apply your bicep skills. Yes, that's where I would, send everybody to learn. And plus, follow the Cloud Marathoner blog posts and, look into new things that's coming there. And while having being in your show, Mert, I want to announce something on a Cloud Marathoner.
Sure.
So in that blog post, if you go and let me actually go there into that blog post, the blog Marathoner. Okay, so it's opening now. So here I started actually this blog post about how you can upskill yourself, how you can get ready to become a Azure architect, how you can prepare yourself to the exam of AZ305. And this is going to be a series of blog posts as you see here. I created first two, but each week planning to create the next one. All right. So you can actually buy, for example, if you want to learn about governance in Azure, let's say you don't even planning to take the test, right? You don't plan to take the test, but you want to learn about Azure Bicep governance, no, Azure governance, and what are the resources there. Then you can just dive here into this first one, learn what the cloud governance means, what are the components of that, and plus all the valuable resources that you can just click on them and read about that and become more proficient in that.
Okay, thank you very much. And these are
And
great resources, by the way.
yeah, and just kind of continue that thing. These are the QCR code. If you have a phone and you want to scan them, this is the Learn Bicep GitHub repo. This is the awesome Azure Bicep. This Bicep project GitHub is the one that Microsoft puts these new versions of Bicep, while the product get evolved. And this is the video course basically on LinkedIn. So these are the QCR codes. Take the picture, go and check them out. And finally, I would like to thank everyone, for your time stopping by and watching this awesome show, Azure Live. This is like awesome name here. And thank you, Matt, for hosting this.
You're welcome. And that's a great presentation. And hope to see you on another Azure live shows, also on Mart the Future, is soon.
Thank
And
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.